My presentation is going to be about a book I just finished. So it's shameless self-promotion. Hopefully it's going to be published next year. So you'll have chance to actually read it, and I hope to hook you a bit on the topic. So as you can see, I quote Pantera, very good band, in the title. Indeed, politics in Bosnia and Herzegovina is a vulgar display of power. I'm not going to talk about consociationalism per se, and should I actually describe the term? So very briefly, okay, maybe not everyone here is familiar with it. Consociationalism is a power-sharing type of post-conflict reconstruction tool, a model for institutionalization, state building, and basically a way to hopefully bring peace, stability, political stability, and eventually democratization and democracy in post-conflict countries. As we all know, Bosnia and Herzegovina is not really the case. It doesn't work that way. After 25 years, we know that much, actually. So there are many books. Bosnia and Herzegovina is actually one of the cases known really well and analyzed from the top to the bottom. And there are two types of theories that explain what happened or what went wrong in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Usually they focus on the institutions. So they tend to say that the institutional structure, the constitutional structure of the country has been built falsely. There are many strange institutions, it's over complex, complicated, cannot really work. Second types of explanations focus on the actors. So the terms we would use here are deep state, patronage. Okay, let's just wait a second. Sorry, I didn't share the presentation on Zoom.
Okay. Colleagues, are you able to see the presentation?
Without my notes, so no spoilers?
Yes.
Perfect, yes, thank you. All right, so the second types of explanations about basically what went wrong focus on actors. And here we would talk about corrupted politicians, political parties that took over the country. So terms like patronage, clientelism, nepotism, and deep state come to mind. What I wanted to do with this book is I wanted to kind of go beyond these two approaches and combine them and merge them. So I came up with two basic questions. First of all, how does the relation between structure and agency, so we are going back to Giddens actually, in power sharing systems look like? And second of all, how does it define the everyday functioning of consociationalism? So I combined many different theoretical and methodological approaches and used something called deviant case analysis. So basically what I did, I looked at the consociational structures. So the four institutions implemented in Bosnia and Herzegovina, but I looked at them from the perspective of what's wrong, when the actors behave in a way that paralyze them or block them. So I look for the cases where when actors deviate from the institutions. And then the behavioral realization of those four institutions, basically looking at the everyday functioning of them. That's just a fancy term for that. Okay, so what I wanted to do, I tried and I wanted to go beyond constitutional engineering. So what we see in the literature nowadays is that basically majority of authors, of scholars look at institutions. They look at constitutional engineering. So they analyze only the institutions. They usually mention the actors, they mention political parties and leaders and politicians. However, it's in a very limited scope. And constitutional engineering is a very powerful tool in post-conflict reconstruction. It basically says that if you implement, it's based on the modernization theory. So basically, if you implement certain institutions, you should expect certain results towards democratization and political stability. All right, let me just put it that way. So the term constitutional engineering basically says that what we expect is that institutions constrain actors. Institutions create certain incentives for the actors to behave in a very certain way that is expected from them. What I thought could be useful was to add the second part to this equation. So not to expect not only that the institutions, so the rules of the game to constrain actors, but also actors to influence institutions. So you can't really see it because of the... Now you can see it. So we have those two effects. The literature tells us only about the first one, the constraining one. I added the second one, the rebound effect. And in an attempt to actually understand and explain why do we have this situation, I went for the congruence theory. Congruence theory, so I went back to the 60s to Almond and Verba theories and works. They publish mostly on political culture among the citizens, so in the nation, but I decided to implement it and talk about political culture only of the political elite, of the actors. So the second hypothesis says that congruence, so congruence between actors, political culture, and institutions is of crucial importance for the constraining and rebound effects to prevail. Basically, what it means is that if we have congruence between actors and institutions, everything is all right. Actors follow the institutions, actors follow the rules of the game. They don't block, they don't deviate from the institution. However, if we don't have congruence, so if the patterns of behavior represented by the actors are different than the patterns of behavior represented by institutions or expected by the institutions, we have the rebound effect. So we have Bosnia and Herzegovina basically, but it's not only Bosnia. We can see this kind of behavior and this kind of effect in all power-sharing countries from Northern Ireland to Macedonia, actually. So as I said very briefly, I triangulated many perspectives and methods to actually get there. I started with power-sharing theory, then I added the congruence theory, but then I lacked a very important element because I didn't know actually how to conceptualize institutions and actors. And to achieve that, I applied actor-centered institutionalism and discursive institutionalism. And it all created, I think, a very neat structure to actually be able to talk about the case of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Okay, so I ended up with two sides of consociationalism. The first one is the institutions. So as I said, the power-sharing theory, the consociational theory, tells us that we have four basic institutions. All of them were implemented in Bosnia and Herzegovina. We have autonomy, grand coalitions, proportionality, and minority veto. They've been all implemented in Bosnia and Herzegovina in a very rigid, formal way, which is also part of the problem. That's what the theory says. But then I also wanted to look at the actors. And using the actor-centered institutionalism, I implemented certain notions from this theoretical approach. So I talked and I wrote about the actors constellation. So basically the party system with the leaders. And then I focused on the capabilities and orientation. So basically, what can they do? What is the financial and material status in Bosnia and Herzegovina? How successful are they? What was their position and situation before, during, and after the war in the 90s? That all influences the situation.
Przepraszam, nie przeskakują slajdy.
Sorry?
Nie przeskakują slajdy. Ciągle widzimy pierwszy slajd.
Okay, that's someone. I don't know why. Yeah, I'm sharing.
Dziękujemy za informację.
Thank
Coś jest
you.
z Zoomem w takim
Can
razie.
you see it now? Is it switching?
Unfortunately not, only the first slide is shown.
Okay. All right, so let's do it that way. Sorry for that, I don't know. And technology is not my strongest side. All right, so we were all right, so the actors. So we have constellation, and then we have capabilities and orientations of political parties. Orientations meaning perceptions and perspectives. So basically, I looked at the political programs and the documents and try to reconstruct the perspective or the view on the political system of Bosnia and Herzegovina, other actors, other groups, the four consociational institutions. Why? Because the assumption is very simple here. So basically, I assume that if the Croat, if HDZ says in the program, in the documents that they don't accept the country, they don't accept the federal structure of the country, their goal is to create a so-called third entity of any other territorial structure that would be their own. That's what we can expect from their behavior. Those are not just empty words. And for example, with the Croats, we can see that's exactly what happened, but I will talk about it in a second. All right, so I had institutions, I had actors, and I combined those two sides of the political system to analyze the everyday functioning, the behavioral side of consociationals, of the power sharing in Bosnia. And I chose specific cases to be analyzed. Obviously, I looked at all the coalitions created in the post-war Bosnia and Herzegovina, especially at the 2006 and 2010 crises. Then at the veto mechanisms, but especially at the way they are used, because the problem in Bosnia is that we have a formal veto mechanism, the vital interest clause. However, it's not really used. It's there in the constitution, it's there in the system. However, it's very difficult to implement. Also, political parties lose control over the institution because it's in the end, the Constitutional Court decides if the claim is valid or not. So they used another institution, an informal veto, to block and paralyze the system, especially the Serbs in Bosnia.
I'm extremely sorry. Can we go to the conclusions?
2 minutes? Due to the technical
yes.
problems?
Okay.
All right. Then I looked at the autonomist politics. So I looked at the Serbs in Republika Srpska, but also at the Croats and their parallel institutions created in firstly during the war, obviously, with Herceg Bosnia, but then in 2000, 2001, again in 2011. Then at the Komšić case, so the Croat in Bosnia who's not really Croat enough to be the Croat representative in the central institutions, and at the constitutional change. So the informalities, the so-called meetings behind closed doors of the political leaders. I wanted to talk about the example of Croat parallel structure, but I don't have the time, you can ask me about it. Obviously the main contribution of the book is the rebound effect. So something I coined as a term, and I think it's useful, I believe in it. You can convince me I'm wrong. So indeed actors deviate from institutions. They abuse the rules of the game implemented with formal structures. The abuse, those deviations are triggered by incongruence between the patterns of behavior of political actors and what the institutions expect them to represent. It really doesn't lead to institutional change. What we talk in consociational systems usually is the fact that it's really difficult to change those systems. It's very difficult to implement new institutions or change the existing ones. There's spectrum of deviation. So there are many different ways in which political actors, parties and leaders deviate from the institutions. It can be direct, indirect, they can overuse or simply misuse it. It can be singular or iterated, so we do see informal institutions in the case. However, it is not necessarily negative. If we look at cases like Brčko in Bosnia and Herzegovina, we can see that the political actors there created a completely parallel informal structure, which actually works and allows the district to actually work. To conclude, and now I cannot read here. I cannot remember. Perfect. So to conclude, certainly there is an insufficiency of the rigidly structural perspective of consociationalism. That means that constitutional engineering is not enough to understand those systems and what's going on in those countries after violent conflicts. For sure, there is a discrepancy between what the structures need to function and what the elites are willing to give. Because first of all, they're willing to talk and to behave according to their needs and what they want from the system. What is more, formal institutions do not immediately constitute a decisive influence on political actors. Yet that's what I said. So the constraining effect is not always what we can see, and it's not always what can be expected. And I believe that the congruence theory is quite helpful, and it does explain the relation between those two elements and which effect prevails. Maybe I should stop here. Thank you so much. Sorry for the technical problems. Not my fault, though.